Good afternoon. As you can imagine, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I thank the team and Dom to have thought about the old folk, in retirement coming up and participating in this event. Dom asked me to try to highlight elements of what occurred 30 years ago and try to investigate how they can influence the future. And he also asked me to drop a few anecdotes on my way. So I will do that. So there will be a little bit, you have lots of history books and so forth if you want to learn about the web and so forth. So this will be a little bit more personal. So it will be my access to the web or my creating of W3C a little bit. But you have to bear for that for 15 minutes, right? Then you will be okay. All right, so I have decomposed this 15, probably 13 minutes into five. First, recall that the web was born in an existing ecosystem, right? It's not the beginning of the world or of the planet and so forth. There was something in existence when the web was created. The second is my first steps in the web, with the web. So that will be a bit more personal, but as you will see, there will be a relationship with what you know as W3C in Europe. My third part will be my first steps with the W3C. So it's one thing to be with the web and then to be with W3C. The fourth will be related to becoming the chairperson of the W3C. And then from that, I will try to look at, as a recursive conclusion, as where the W3C now is in the current ecosystem that is 30 years later. So first, the web was born in an existing ecosystem. I'm sure most of you know that, but I want to briefly repeat it. First, I want to give recognition to INRIA and to his first president, Jacques-Louis Lyons, who became president in 1990 of INRIA, which was just created. And he used to, so when he was in his first talk being chosen as president, he said there was only one person who had in his brain the whole history of the computer science, computer industry, computer technology. That person was John von Neumann, and he passed away in 1957. Okay? So we were in 1980. So the message from Lyons was that the computing industry, what we would call today the digital world, was no longer an individual or a small team thing. It was already a distributed thing, and when you wanted to do something new, you had to take into account the skills, the expertise, the results of others than yourself in order to do, okay. So for the web, same thing. Well, the web was 10 years later, right? So in a few words, in a few dates. Usually when people talk about the birth of the web or the birth of the idea of the web, you start from 1945, right? Vannevar Bush, who used to be the head of the scientists who were building what it took to win the war during the World War II, in the article As We May Think, in 1945, Vannevar Bush says, okay, now you guys have won the war, so you need to have another mission, right? And the mission that is described in this article is you scientists should put together the system that will allow other scientists and the society at large to benefit from your own knowledge, right? From science. I know that these days there are people who are denying the role of science in the world, but at the time it was undisputed that science was a key element, the key foundation of society. So that was the mission that, okay, so remember that 1945, This is 3 years before the invention of the transistor, right? So the thoughts of Vannevar Bush were not driven by technology at all. He even invented a machine that will never exist called Memex, where he used analog microfilms and so forth to store information and retrieve it and so. So anyway, forget about the Memex. The idea, the mission was set for the people. So that's 1945. Then in the 60s, there were many people engaged, of course. Then you have digital world, and 2 people needs to be mentioned here. The first is Doug Engelbart. Doug Engelbart in December 1968 made a demo in a conference held in San Francisco, which is now called the mother of all demos. So I encourage you to go to YouTube, you type mother of all demos, and you will get, this is the first conference that was recorded, right, in 1968. So you have the 1 hour and 30 minutes demo of demos available. I encourage you to, and even on YouTube, they made it 21st century. So since 1 hour and 30 minutes is too much for any individual now, right? I mean, you guys need information in 20 minutes or so. It's split into a series, right? So you can watch 20 minutes of it every night after dinner before going to bed, and you get the whole demo. So that's Doug Engelbart. I'll talk about him at the end also. But so the other person in the 60s is Ted Nelson. So Ted Nelson, you probably know, is the inventor of the hypertext. And so he's the first contributor. And the ideas of Vannevar Bush in the analog machines, he took over. Like one of his projects, he called it Memex, Ted Nelson, referring to Vannevar Bush. So he invented the hypertext because the recognition is you don't share science and so forth just with text. You need hypertext, an hypertext approach if you want to teach. So the second person in the 60s is Ted Nelson. Then we move to the 70s, and then 2 people closer to the web you start to recognize. One is Vint Cerf, okay, and I don't have to comment. He's one of the inventor of the TCP/IP protocol, said as with Bob Kahn, and said as being, the inventor of the internet. You probably know this picture where I did not invent the web and the internet with Tim Berners-Lee. Anyway, so Vint Cerf, and the other is Charles Goldfarb. Charles Goldfarb was the head of the ISO group who developed SGML. Right? So you probably know that SGML is at the heart, HTML being a very derivative or application of SGML. That's the 70s. Then in the 80s, you have another dimension to developing technology. That's the X-Window Consortium, created by Bob Scheifler at MIT, and which will be the model for the World Wide Web Consortium 10 years later. And so this is the history before 1989 as Dom. So now I've made the link with Dom's slide. When Tim produces his initial document called Information Management, a proposal, which come back from his boss with the comment, vague but exciting. So that's the beginning of the web. The follow-up and you get in any good book about the web. So now let's go to the second part of my series, right? So my first step with the web. So you're sitting today in an amphitheater called the Cannes Amphitheater. Gilles Cannes was, sorry, I always have emotion when I say that, but that will go. So Gilles Cannes was a very close friend of mine from professional, and he's the one who, and we used to have a conversation at night, at the end of the afternoon, in the evening, before going home, on any sort of topic. He was based in Sophia Antipolis. I was in Rocancourt in Paris. So twice a month, maybe sometimes once a week if there were hot topics, we would spend 1 or 2 hours. And one day, he says, you should FTP Mosaic, right? So Gilles is the one who gave me my first web lesson. So I downloaded Mosaic. I obeyed my friend. I downloaded Mosaic, and you can imagine the rest is history, right? That was my first contact with. Everybody knows what Mosaic is? Okay. All right. So it was obvious. So in the INRIA community at the time, we started to talk to each other about the web and so on. And so that's what the Gilles call was in the spring '93. In the fall '93, there's been enough movement within Europe actually, and ERSIM. You know ERSIM, right? ERSIM was at the time not the host of W3C, of course, but it was a way for research lab to get together on common project. And in the fall of '93, Stephen Pemberton in Amsterdam at CWI organized a workshop where all the countries, UK, Germany, France, and so forth. So that was the first European gathering around the web, as everybody shared what they were doing and so forth. Spring '94, the momentum has grown even further, and to the point that the president of INRIA, Alain Bensoussan, says we should do something very special about it. And he invites at Rocancourt for a working lunch Hubert Curien, who is the head of CERN, together with Robert Caillot and Tim Berners-Lee. So that's the first time I met Tim. On the INRIA side, there was Alain, Gilles, of course, Vincent Quin, who would become the author of Amaya and the head of interaction at W3C. Okay, so here we are for the first time, and Tim mentions to me that he's talked to Michael Retuzos about doing something similar to the X-Window Consortium. And it so happened that 10 years earlier, or in the 80s, I had been involved in the X-Window system. I was the first Frenchman to attend the first X-Window Consortium meeting at MIT. So the minute he talks about this, we engage and so forth. The next week, he sends me email. He says, I want to come back to INRIA. And he wants to spend a full day knowing everything about INRIA. So I invite Gilles, who comes. So Tim comes from Geneva. Gilles comes from Sofia. And the three of us spend the full day showing to Tim what INRIA is and what we could do and so forth. As a consequence of that, I'm invited to attend the first conference, the first World Wide Web conference in Geneva, was held in June '94. During the summer, the first committee to organize conferences is held in Boston, because on the US side, the NCSA, the University of Urbana-Champaign, of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, is organizing a second conference the same year. Right? A second conference on the World Wide Web in Chicago. So we start to talk to get organized, so who will be the third, the fourth, and so forth. And during that conference in Chicago, I make the proposal to have the conference in Paris, which would be '96, because between so there was one in Darmstadt and one in Boston before the slot was available. It's like the Olympic Games, right? So so we go to Chicago, and here, for the first time, we understand there is a tension between MIT and CERN. The tension is that Tim has decided to move to MIT and to create the World Wide Web Consortium, but he's Tim, right? So he wants the consortium to deserve the first two Ws, right? To be a worldwide consortium. So, and of course, the normal candidate is CERN. So they're trying to discuss on how to do it and so forth, and it doesn't work very well. But I am on the sidelines at the time. In November, there is a sort of, you could call it the first AC meeting. I call it the first AC meeting since the consortium has been created in October. But since they don't go along well, there is one in Boston, organized by MIT. And the next day, so after the meeting, the guy from MIT, Alveza from MIT, and Tim, they hop on a plane, they do a red eye to Brussels, and we have the meeting in Brussels. And it doesn't go any better, right? So there is tension between the two. As a consequence of that, between Christmas and New Year, and as I say often, children are not there when their parents conceive them, right? So I don't know what happened in this meeting between the European Commission, the MIT, CERN maybe, whatever. And they decide that INRIA would be the host for the European Consortium. So they call Alain Bensoussan between Christmas and New Year. So this is our present, right? So INRIA has been asked to become the host, the European host of the World Wide Web Consortium in December '94. And of course, immediately, Alain tells me, now it's your job, go do it. So that's '95. I spent '95 building the foundation of the World Wide Web Consortium in Europe. So the first thing I do, of course, is a trip to CERN to meet Håkon Lie and Henrik Frischting-Nielsen, who are the two engineers working with Tim. And we decide, Håkon decides to stay in Europe, and Henrik decides to move to MIT. So Henrik would work on HTTP with Jim Geddes and be the editor of the HTTP 1.1 specification. And Håkon decides to come to INRIA. And he is working on style sheets with Bert. Bert, here. So that's why you're here today, because Gilles, Håkon, and myself sit down, and say, okay, now INRIA is the host. Where is the team, right? And the three of us decide that it would be Sophia Antipolis. Otherwise, you would be in Rocancourt or Nancy or Grenoble. So you're today sitting in the Cannes Amphitheater in Sophia Antipolis because the three of us made that decision in the spring of 1995. And during that spring, as Dom just told you, on April 7th, there is this announcement in Brussels. So there's a press release, but there is a meeting in Brussels with the press and so forth, where we announced that W3C Europe will be hosted by INRIA and so forth. So that's so now that's the beginning of the work, right? So we need to find money. So we have a little bit of money, a significant amount of money from the European Commission, who, just get in their pockets, in their secret pockets, and that's too important. So here is the money. So we have something to start with. We can pay Håkon and so on. But we need to find members. So that's my job in 1995. And in November, when we meet, we make a special event at the Maison de la Chimie in Paris. I have been able to assemble 20 full members. There is 1,000 people in the room. There is energy everywhere. And the W3C in Europe has started. So then, next step is, the next chapter is becoming the chairperson. So in 1996, first we have the first AC meeting organized in Europe. It's in Paris. Since the conference would be held in May at La Défense, I asked La Défense to have a smaller room in January to hold the AC meeting. And that's sort of a rehearsal for the conference. And so we have the meeting here. And here, the anecdote is a sad one, but I'm on my way to becoming the chairperson. And during the AC meeting, President Mitterrand passed away. So for the first time and the only time in my life, I have to deliver the tribute to President Mitterrand. I mean, any public meeting on that day need to start with the delivery of a tribute for President, and that's what I had to do. So it's very emotional to do that, but that's an anecdote as you asked for it. A few months later, we have the World Wide Web Conference in Paris. And here the anecdote, well, I don't know if I should say anecdote, is that I succeed in having the Louvre Pyramid as the place for the social event. And last week, I still have one person who I've never met who was part of the 2,300 participants who told me that she was a student and was attending, and she still remembers that social event under the pyramid. So that's the fun part of it. Next month is less fun. That's the next AC meeting held in the Boston area. It's called, for those who were there, it's the famous Peabody meeting, right? So Peabody is the name of the village, well, close to, there is a museum here. Anyway, we got, I don't know the right word in English, we got attacked by the members because the team is not focused enough, we're doing too many things, and so on. So the tension is really hard. And they say, you don't have any process, how do you choose to go to do this rather than that, and so on and so forth. So, and one, Carl Cargill, the representative from Netscape, stands up and say, okay, I'm Carl Cargill, I'm the one who kills consortia. And all right, so that's the atmosphere at that moment. At the same time, Michael Retuzos is trying to get me in the chairperson position because the person who is doing it at MIT, Alveza, is retiring. So the position is open, and at the same time we get attacked by the members. I'm asked to become the chairperson. As a well, I say yes. I'm young at that time and help. And the two first things that I do is in July, I go to KO in order to sign the contract that would make KO a host. That's my first official action as the chair. And the second, when I come back in September, is to put together the process ERB, which means Process Editorial Review Board. At the time, the process is when you define what a working group is and so on. So there is no process since so it's a bizarre word. But today we would call that a process working group. And I'm sharing that process working group, and the rest is history. Now you can go to the website and see the process document and its evolution. Where is Ian? Okay, well, one of the key person who helped me make that document happen is Ian Jacobs. So thanks, Ian, for that. All right, let me go to my conclusion. So W3C in its ecosystem. So if you remember what I said in the introduction, there were a number of organizations with which we were naturally, we needed to have a relationship. So the first obvious one was the IETF, right? Tim, when he created the first specs for the web, the URL, the HTTP, and the HTML, he went to IETF like anybody would have gone at that time. And two working groups were working okay, the URL and the HTTP. And the HTML, the IETF community didn't have the language expertise. They had the protocol for HTTP. They didn't have the language expertise. So the group was going very slow. And the industry potential partners were not happy with the speed, right? Remember? With the speed. And therefore, they asked for the creation of W3C in order to accelerate the development of HTML. So as a consequence, we had to discuss with IETF, and we invited Harald Elvestrand, who was the area director of the corresponding working groups, and he accepted, and he went to give a talk at the next EC meeting in '97 in London, And he acknowledged the fact that they would do HTTP and a URL, and we acknowledged the fact that Jim Gates and Henrik Frischneck-Nielsen from the team will work and be editors of the HTTP document in IETF at the same time as HTML would move to W3C, and then Dave Raggett, right? Later Arnaud Lehor, and so forth would be Dan Connolly, would be the key staff contact and staff contributors to the development of HTML. So if you want to know more about HTML, ask Dave, not me, right? So that's the first. The second, so IETF, I mentioned. The second is HTML. So here it was tougher. Because with IETF it went very well. I mean, reasonable people talk to each other, and we get to the conclusion, good thing. With HTML, it was a little more difficult. So Charles Goldfarb never wanted to get involved, but another person named John Bozak finally decided to create a working group at the request of Dan Connolly, who was a staff person at the time. So to create the HTML and the web working group, and a year later, they came out with what is now known as XML, with significant roadblocks on the way, but we finally announced it at the conference. So that's another community we had to get engaged with, and with whom we finally succeeded to develop the technology that was required. A more easy one was the accessibility community. So we were requested by the White House and the European Commission to pay attention to accessibility. So I don't have to comment on that. It's obvious for all of you. So we organized the Web Accessibility Initiative, and the person who got involved was Judy Brewer, who we hired as the head of the Web Technology Initiative. So I'm getting to the end of this. I don't know if I should say talk, right? Not a presentation. And I would like to say a few words about two people, and then make relations with the situation you're in now. First, you probably noticed I didn't talk about Ted, but actually, thanks to KO, we had a relationship with Ted. It was not a working relationship, but he was a keynote. He was working at KO at some point, and he was a keynote in one of the AC meetings that was held in Japan. And I want to finish with Doug Engelbart. Doug, among all those people, he was born 1 year after my father, right? So he was considered by all of us as the reference. We had a lot of admiration and so forth. And I had the luck, so it's another anecdote, to have a lunch with him at Kendall Square next to MIT, Tim, Doug, and myself. And I've been impressed by the humility of that person who had made it happen. He was admiring what we were doing while he had been at the origin of it. So the lesson is the brilliant people are very often the most humble. And I think that respect, humility, hard work, passion, all of that we learned from Doug. And when I came today, I found that in this room, and I congratulate you. I think that you're on the right track, and keep up with the good work, and good luck. So that would be my conclusion for today. Thank you.